very, very dangerous.
If you spidey sense, I was like, oh, something's off.
I'm just like, man, I'm waiting to hear something,
Keep that crowd warmed up. Is Mr. Jehovah Tiger.
What's going on, guys, and welcome to another edition of the War Cry Podcast. I'm your host, Jehovah Tiger. Looking a little greasy, it is what it is. But thank you for joining me on this episode. I got a really good guest. I'm really excited about this one. This has been about a month in the making, I would say. But before we get to that, I got a new sponsor for the show. It is Not Your Grandma's Quilts. I have a few of them, but basically it is, handmade items. They're sewn. You could get baby blankets. You can do, and I'm doing this off the cuff too. I'm trying to remember all this, but it's a Not Your Grandma's Quilting. Find them on Facebook. You're looking for something really quickly for the holidays. I got about 4 kids blankets that are like about 3 years old. They're amazing. Go find them on Facebook at Not Your Grandma's Quilting, and go check them out. Shoot them a message. I believe they take cash, PayPal, Venmo, Cash App. And I'm sure there's other payments too, but go check them out on Facebook. Another thing, Patreon, guys. 2025 is gearing up to be a really good year. And you guys can hear my ice machine in the background. But 2025 is gearing up to be a really, really, really big year for the podcast. I'm trying to, get monetized. I'm almost close here on YouTube. But the goal is to make some money on the podcast, upgrade my equipment. One of the ideas that I got kicking around in my head is I want to get out to Merle Home and show you guys exactly where these things happened in my stories that I tell, and show you guys, the different intricate little trails that they got out there. And I'm sure it's all overgrown now, but that's kind of what I'm an idea that I have out there that I want to do for the podcast. Also, too, with the Patreon, you get listener episodes. So, my guest tonight is a Patreon member, and so you might get your own little, episode. Get to tell your stories, things like that. And also, too, there's a community chat, and also, too, you get access to like stuff that's a little too spicy. Might be a little too spicy. Coming down the pipeline on Patreon is a Missing 401, a 3-part series that I'm doing research for. I'm trying to make sure that I get that, taken care of, and give you guys, interesting cases and also my opinion of it as well. Another one is that's going to be actually dropping this week is, and it's going to be a live stream. So if you're a member, you get to watch this live. And it's basically best of TVs and movies for 2024. Also, too, coming down the pipeline. This is non-Patreon related, but join the Patreon. The link is in. It's not in the bio, but it's on my Facebook page, and I'll get it in there. So if you're listening to this at the tomorrow or a week from now, it'll be in there. But the best of Warcry podcast in 2024. I cannot wait because it's bringing back so many different little stories that I forgot about. Conversations with different guests, such as Res Scares, such as Kevin Nez from the East Society podcast, such as Patrick Meekin, Matt Sieber from East Tennessee Bigfoot. A lot of different people, in 2025, we're going to take it to the next level. We're going to do a few things, as you guys can see from my face. You guys haven't ever seen my face, but here it is. 7 days into the carnivore diet. We'll see how it goes. I'm feeling better. I was feeling really crappy there for a while, but a small plug for carnivore diet. But with that being said, this person um, reached out to me some time ago. Um, I was on another podcast, and I had been talking about the infamous Concho Lucky Star Casino in Concho. And I had been talking about this for almost a year and a half at that point. Or at this point in the podcast, almost 2 years. Um, but a year and a half ago, I said something about it on a podcast, on a different podcast, and this person heard it and said, "You know what? I'm gonna reach out to him." And it confirmed a lot of things. If you guys want to hear the full kind of gamut of the different witnesses that I had a chance to talk to, Patreon, Bigfoot at the Casino on Patreon. You guys, while you join Patreon, you get things that I'm not going to put on YouTube. But I'm really excited about this guest, and joining me to the stage, Miss Rebecca. How are you doing?
Hello.
And so we got going a little bit, talking, and I was asking a bunch of questions, um, but before we get to the Bigfoot, I know that's what people want to hear. That's something that's been in Oklahoma lore for forever and a day.
Ever.
Yeah, forever and a day. But before we get to that, you said you had a lot of creepy stuff growing up. A lot of creepy stuff going
Yes.
on. Could you tell us some stories or kind of tell us some things?
Okay, so the first thing that I actually remember is we were about 6 or 7. Let's see, my brother's 4 years younger. So, no, I was about 8 because he was about 4 or 5. And we were at my Aunt Vonnie's house, and she lives way out in the country. I'm talking like 12 miles way out in the country. That if you didn't know where you were going, you'd get lost. And the way her house sat, she was on top of a hill, and you'd have to go down, and then it flattened out, and then there's a creek behind her house. Well, every evening that we would go down there to play by the creek, this little Indian boy would come up to us. And we didn't know his name. We called him Charlie. He answered to it. There was about 5 or 6 of us all playing down there with him. And he was like, okay, I got to go home as soon as it started getting dark. And we were like, okay, we'll see you tomorrow. Well, come to find out, Charlie was a ghost.
Oh.
There was nobody that lived around them for at least 5 to 6 miles. And the way he would have to walk across the creek and up this little hill, and then as soon as he would get about 100 yards from us, we couldn't see him no more.
Like he was just vanished, or just was like in the kind of...
Yeah, you couldn't. You just wouldn't, like, you would look back and he would be gone.
Oh. Oof.
So that's one of the things that started all this for me. And then when we were younger, and where we lived like in Kingfisher. We lived about a block and a half from a creek, Uncle John's Creek. And there's this bridge that goes out to College Hill. And my dad used to tell us at night, like, y'all better get in here. Them little people are going to get you. He's like, that little green man's going to get you. And I didn't know what he was talking about. Then as we got older, he told us that a friend of his was an older Indian man that lived out there on College Hill. He would come by and ask Dad, do you have any cigarettes? Well, my dad didn't smoke, but he always kept tobacco and stuff for all the elders and everything. So he gave him a pack of cigarettes, and he's like, why are you going through these cigarettes? He said, when I get to that bridge, I light 4 or 5 of them, throw them on the ground. He said, and when I get across the bridge and turn around, those little cigarettes are just walking about 2 foot off the ground. He said, you can see them moving. So he was giving the little people tobacco.
Making sure that he was able to get home, sound like.
Yeah. So that's why when we learned if you eat at night outside, we always left plates out.
Mm.
And anywhere I go, I leave plates of food out for people.
Did you I guess did he see, you said like 2 foot off, you said 2 foot off the ground, right?
Yeah, he could see like just the little embers just going
Mm.
across the ground.
Did he ever see
They would
anything what they
go
look like?
down. He said he didn't really pay attention. He would just like glance back and see them going, and then he would just keep walking. But the little person, this is later on, the little person that I seen looked like a little fat person, like a little
Mm.
bitty. He was only about, he was probably about like that tall. And he wasn't any bigger. And we were at Robert's State Cave for our honeymoon, and I went back to the car because I picked up these little bitty tiny pine cones. And I was like, since I'm taking these, I'm going back to the car and I'm getting a gift and I'm going to give it back. Because I seen him run from one tree like he was following us. He'd run from one tree to another and then he'd peek out.
What was he dressed like?
He
What
had
did you
on
see?
like a little gray shirt, kind of like a little wool gray shirt and like little gray pants. That's basically all because he was like a little blur when he was running.
Oh wow.
They're a little
You know, I
fast.
was
They're fast.
I was always told, that you always have to leave things the way that they were, unless you got to, like you mentioned. I've heard that too as well, where if you take something, you got to give something back, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I had a relative one time. They went down one of their trails, little people trails, and they was really just kind of breaking stuff and limbs and stomping mud, and they come back and they had some things happen to them, and different things go missing, or you lose time, like on your way back you lose time, or just kind of weird things like that. And they got
Yeah.
back to the house, and all of a sudden they were like, man, there's something going on over here at the house. And they're like, oh well, we was just on this trail. And I think I want to say it was my great grandpa. I can't remember exactly who it was, but basically had to go back and fix things and try to, basically apologize for almost like walking in their house, I guess, kind of thing.
Yeah. Because I have had where we've taken stuff and not left anything, and we had stuff happen that we've actually taken stuff back. When we were in Wyoming, where my brother lives, my older brother, there's about 30 miles away from him, Fort Laramie in Wyoming. There's a fort, an old fort out there. Well, my brother and my dad found a button on the ground. Inside, they were digging around and they found a button and they brought it back. And my brother, we were staying in his RV. He puts it in the RV, and that night it sounded like something jumped on top of the roof of the RV and like scratching the top of the RV. So we all ended up running in to the house. I mean, we were screaming and everything, but they went out there and couldn't find nothing.
Mm.
And my dad's like, what is going on? And Mike said, well, I put that button in the RV. So the next day, my dad made us take it back.
Man, do you think that it was?
It looked like it was a military from the fort. It was a button that they had found off one of the uniforms.
So you don't think it was LP?
No, I think it was somebody looking for their button.
Mm. It's crazy. Yeah, I've told this story before, but Hardy in his I don't know if you heard that story about him taking a bunch of arrowheads, and his house was like basically haunted for like until he returned them back or whatever. But I had a buddy of mine, kind of something similar happened like that, or where he basically he went home to Tahlequah, and then he ended up coming back, but he couldn't find his glasses for a while. I don't know what he did when he was back home, but it's crazy how those things, when you take things that aren't really yours, um, how that can affect you, you know?
Yeah, I've learned not to take anything unless I have something to return or give back to them. So, like, when my mom used to work at the hospital in Kingfisher, the old hospital, we would see all kinds of stuff in there. We seen ghosts. We'd hear ghosts. I've seen the angel of death. One night I came in from work. I was working at the casino at the time, and I had come in, and this older man was getting ready to pass away. I kept asking Mom, who's that man in there standing by his bed? Because he wasn't supposed to have any visitors. It was like 2:00 in the morning. And my mom said, there's nobody in there. There shouldn't be anybody in there. And I'm like, Mom, there's a man standing by his bed. She said, I know. She said, he's fixing to pass, and he's fixing to take him home.
Mm.
And then the next time, when we looked back in the room, you could kind of see it, like, you know how on Star Trek, when they beam them up, the little sparkles?
Yeah.
That's all we seen in his room the next time we looked.
Wow.
It just looked like sparkles coming down. And the man was gone.
What did the man look like?
He was really tall, slender. He was dressed in a nice black, like, suit. It was kind of dark in there to where you couldn't really see. But he had on like a dark suit. He had on like shoulder length hair, dark hair. But you could tell because he was so pale. Like his face just illuminated. And I think when we started talking about him is when he disappeared.
Mm.
And the next morning, the guy did pass away in there.
I got goosebumps you telling that story. That's one thing about hospitals and
That
nursing
hospital had a
homes.
lot of stuff. There's one wing that I wouldn't go down because they had a mental patient in the hospital, and they would have to lock him up because he would bang himself on the walls and stuff, and you could hear him screaming. And then one night when I went in there, the girls that worked with my mom, they were always like, Ari, go get rid of that. Go take care of that. And she's like, I can't do it. This isn't my house. But you could hear like banging, and you could hear screaming from that room. And he wasn't there no more, but he had passed away later on.
And what I don't know if you were able to give is the hospital still going right now to this day?
No, it's gone. It's the old Kingfisher Hospital.
Okay. Man.
It used to be on 9th Street in Kingfisher. They tore it down.
Yeah, I would have done that too. Hearing that.
Well, what is funny is one night I came in to see my mom. I had went and got them food, and it was about 2:00 in the morning. And because I worked the night shift at the casino for a long time, and I went and got them food, and I was coming in, and the way it was is you go in the door, and then you turn either left to go to surgery and the emergency room, or right. You would turn right, and there's these long hallways. And then when you had turned left, there was a little dining room, and then down the long hallway to the nurse's station. Well, when I got to the door to turn left, I heard footsteps. And I was like, the dining room light only had one little light on, and I was like, oh Lord, there's nobody in there. So I take off running, and all of a sudden I hear footsteps running behind me. It was the nurse's aide coming from the dining room. She said, I seen you start running, so I decided to run with you. I was like, because you scared me.
Everybody getting spooked out in there. They can't even anything move, anything that's not natural. Y'all start taking off in there. Ah,
Oh yeah, they did. The girls were always had the lights on. Like one night when the electricity went out, they had someone pass away in one of the rooms, and there was a big old thunderstorm. And where the person passed away, that was the only light in the hospital that was on. It stayed on. And they were all freaked out.
why do you think they closed that
And
hospital?
it cracks me up because they built a bigger one outside of town.
Okay,
They built a great big huge one.
okay. I was just thinking like
And that
maybe it was like
hospital was old.
I was thinking maybe there was like something
Oh no,
happened.
because
They
the
was like,
new
we gotta
one
close
was
it down.
haunted too.
Which one? I'm
No,
sorry.
the new one was haunted too. I don't know if it followed them, but like you could hear walking in the new one. Like you could hear somebody walking down the halls at night. But see, they moved the machinery and stuff from the old hospital to the new one.
Oh, that did.
So I always think
That's what happened.
spirits attached. Yeah. And the newer hospital was freakier than the old one because it was bigger and more hallways, longer hallways, more doors you had to go through. Yeah, I didn't like going out there. It was scary.
And so the Kingfisher area is pretty. It's pretty spooky out that way. Is what it sounds like.
Yeah. It's got a lot of history to it too, so but I was trying to think about what else happened in Kingfisher. Because a lot of the stuff as I moved, like a lot of the stuff happened in Wyoming. My brother, where he lives, there's the Oregon Trails.
Mm.
And at night, if you would go out there behind the river, you would hear the Indian drums out there. And every once in a while, it would look like there was an Indian sitting on a horse in full dress, holding his lance. But you would hear the drums. You would hear the Indian music. You could hear it going out there. And you could hear it sounded like wagon wheels. Because the Oregon Trail, they have the ruts out there where the Oregon Trail went through.
Mm-hmm.
And it late at night out there by the river, it sound like wagons and horses and stuff going out.
So much
See,
history.
I didn't tell a lot of people Yeah. See, I didn't tell a bunch of people because I was like, man, they're going to lock me up.
But you'd be surprised,
This
though.
has been.
You'd be surprised at how many people, have had a lot of crazy stories or a lot of crazy things happening to them. Like there's times where somebody will, like a relative or something, or my brother will say, "Man, you remember that one time, or you remember this?" I'm like, "Golly, I forgot about that." People was like, "Man, how you always got stories?" Like, man, I've experienced a lot. I guess sometimes my own stupidity, but yeah, it's crazy. Just having stories and just experience things.
Yeah. Because my dad would tell us stories too. I mean, he would, before he passed away, all the time, he would always tell us stories. He would tell stories of what his mom would tell us about the camps in Colorado with the Cheyennes. Because I don't want to say I'm paranoid now, but my dad used to always tell us like the owl people are going to get you if you don't get in here. Because we like to stay out at night. But I remember him telling us when we were little that get in here, the owl people are going to get you. As I guess when his grandma was younger, they used to feed the owl people. They would put all the women and children in one teepee, and once a month they would leave out offerings and stuff, and they would say you could hear something swoop, a bunch of stuff swoop in, and they were kind of like people with bodies, but they'd have wings and they'd have owl faces.
Mm.
And if the kids cried or made sounds, they would take the kids or whoever was making noise.
Man.
So yeah, he would tell us that, but his grandma told us, or his mom told him that.
Man, that's creepy. That's
And
super creepy.
she used to tell us about the giant. I never got to meet my grandma. She passed away before I was born, but Dad used to tell how they would be sitting out at Concho and the giant frogs would hop up around the powwow grounds. And she said these frogs would be like 2 to 3 foot high and probably weigh like 50 to 75 pounds.
I've never heard that. Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
he always told us about it. He would tell stories and stuff. So, because even my mom, after my mom and dad got married, they stayed at my grandma's house. And my mom said that you would hear because she still lived in her little shack where she had the dirt floor and everything. And they said you would hear that front door open and close. And my grandma would be like, Lawrence, you can't come in here. You're going to scare everybody. Go back outside. And you'd hear the front door open and close again.
What do you think that was?
Grandma would make my grandpa out.
What do you think that was?
I think that I really do believe that I want to say our loved ones come back, because after my daughter was born, my grandma, she's named after my grandma, who I've never met. And one night I got up with her because my daughter was crying, and I sat in the chair, and my daughter was looking up, and I felt somebody bend over me and kiss the top of my forehead. And I think it was my grandma, because I could smell like the perfume and I could smell the cigarette smoke. And my daughter was looking over my shoulder, like looking up at something. But my daughter's named after my grandma.
Coming back to check up on y'all.
Yeah. Well, see, and then when I worked at the I got into a bad relationship, and before I moved out, I would see this little old man walk up our sidewalk, and he would just stand there at the gate and stare at our house. I seen this for like a week, and I kept telling my mom, I said, I don't know what this little old man is doing. I said, he just keeps walking up to the gate, but he doesn't come in. He doesn't speak to me. And I said, when I go back to look out, he's gone. And one day I was going through a picture album of my mom and dad's old of theirs when they got married, and my grandma and all them were alive. And I bust out crying because I was like, who is this? Who is this old man? And my dad said, that's your grandpa. That's my dad. I said, no, it can't be, because this is the guy that I seen standing at our gate.
Man.
And my mom asked me, said, why didn't he come in? Well, at the time, I was oiling my doors and saging my house all the time. And I told Mom, I said, I don't think he could come in because of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, especially trying to keep, I guess at the same time you
stuff
keep
out.
Yeah.
That's why now here, I don't do it as often since my dad passed away. unless we really have to smoke the house off or something, because I seen my dad and my daughter seen my dad here.
Mm.
And I was like, I said, Dad, I said, I've got to smoke the house off because stuff's moving, stuff's dropping, and I don't want to let anything else in. And then I just did tell him and smoke the house off, and I won't hear or see anything for a while.
Yeah, I had
Because
a
my
friend of
daughter has
mine.
that too. She sees stuff.
So she sees a lot of stuff too. Like, just, I mean, is she
Oh
seeing
yeah.
just ghosts or more than that?
She oh no, she can actually when she was smaller, my mom lives in Wetumpka, and which is like 20 miles from here. She moved down here when my daughter was born. And because my dad didn't want my daughter going to daycare. So when we moved to Holdenville, my mom was coming over and I was like, I'm gonna call grandma and see where she's at. And my daughter's like 3 years old, and she said, oh, grandma's at Blondie's. She's coming this way. She's at Blondie's. And I was like, well, I'm gonna call and see. So I called my mom. I said, where you at? She said, oh, I just turned at Blondie's. I'm like, you're kidding. She's like, no, I just turned on to, because it's a gas station outside of town. It's about 10 miles from here. Yeah, she does that. She used to do that all the time.
Does she have a lot of
And
crazy dreams or
with
anything?
her, actually, yeah, because she told us one night she was scared. She used to sleep with us. And one night when we finally got her in her own bed, she said, Mama, this triangle thing came in my room. She said it was just lights and it was shaped as a triangle. She said, I don't know what it is. And she said, then Grandpa came in and it went away.
Mm.
And she said, Grandpa protected me. And I said, was you dreaming? And she said, I don't think so. And I was like, well, I don't know what that was. But yeah, she's done the where she tells us like stuff's going to happen, and it usually does. But I did the same thing when I was young. So,
Can you name anything that she's done that she's
oh, and then when she was 3, this is about the same time, and we had moved over here. I have a friend that has a bed and breakfast, and she also has they had a dining room where they would do parties and stuff like that. And they had a father daughter dance and party over there. And so my husband and our daughter went, and my husband said everything was fine. They were eating cake, they were dancing, and he said all of a sudden she just went still. Her eyes got big and she started screaming and crying, saying, I want to go home. I want to go home. Well, I already had known that this place was haunted. I had seen a little boy and girl in this place. And I was like, did she tell you why? She's like, no. She cried all the way home. She kept screaming, I just want to go home. I want to go home now. So they got her home. And I'm trying to talk to her and she wouldn't tell me. So finally, I just sat her down and I said, what happened? She said the lady with black eyes in the pink dress was staring at me and she kept walking towards me. And I was like, okay. So I had to call my friend and tell her, and she's like, I haven't seen nothing. She said, now I hear stuff at night, but I haven't seen nothing.
wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
and
I
she's
mean,
seen stuff like if it's crazy.
let me ask you this. When she can see things such as like these different entities, do you think that, because I know that everyone kind of, or not everyone, but some people think that, these entities are demons or these entities are So that's what some people believe. Now, some other people believe that it's just ghosts. It's just spirits and energy and all that stuff. Can she tell a difference between those things, or is it just kind of one thing?
I'm Now there is a difference between angels, demons, and ghosts. For someone who sees a lot of stuff, I've seen the demons. I've seen demons in hiding. Like I've seen, I'm not going to say anybody's name or anything, but there was an older gentleman and he was arguing with my ex-husband. And when my husband went near him, he sat down on the couch, but whatever was in him or on him stood up, and it was massive. It had wings. To me, it kind of looked like a Jeepers Creepers.
Oh man.
And I backed into the hallway and I had to leave because I was like, oh Jesus, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. I was like gone. I was like, because the ones that I had seen were not that big. But like this is one of the biggest ones I had ever seen. I've seen the little ones, like the black little shadow ones.
Mm-hmm.
But this was one of the biggest ones. And I've seen angels. So not clearly, but you can sense them and see them. As I told my mom, I said, if I ever see an angel, I said, I'm going to wrestle him like Jacob did. I'm going to grab on and wrestle him.
Yeah, just hang on for dear life, sound like.
Yep, that's what Jacob did. So I was like, no, my luck, I'll probably get hurt really bad.
That's very interesting. You bring up a lot of good points about that because, I have heard stories from people that basically people who have this, and like I said, I'm not overly secular religion. I believe that I believe that there's angels, demons, and I believe that there's a higher power. And I think that one thing that creeps me out the most is the evil side or the bad side, because sometimes people masquerade in that stuff. They have one attached to them or something like that. And like I hear so many stories about that, and that part just creeps me out so much.
Yeah, see, because like the down here that I've noticed from when I was around Kingfisher, there's a lot more. Like I wondered if a lot of the tribal people around here played with the black magic. I've seen shapeshifters. And this is before Harry Potter ever came out, but when I lived in Wetumpka, we were walking uptown one night and it looked like one of the Dementors flew over a building and came down. And I wasn't the only one that seen it. 2 other people seen it too. Because they were like, what was that? And I was like, I have no idea.
What did it look like?
But I wasn't going to say nothing. It looked like a Dementor. That's exactly like the black cape, how it flows behind them when they fly.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of looked like that. It just looked like kind of like a black sheet just flew down and came down, and it went inside a building. But the building that it went into was boarded up and locked.
Oh, man. Oh, God.
So, but Wetumpka there was a lot in that town too. Like on 75, I seen this. This is why I always think there's some natives around here playing with stuff, because when I was coming down 75 one time, there's a hill that you have to go down a little bit and then it flattens out. And I seen this bird and I was like, man, that bird cannot fly. It was going all over the place. like left, right. It was just moving like something was wrong with it. And so we seen it land on the side of the road. And when we got up there, there was a little dog walking towards us. It
Yep.
wasn't a bird. And I was like, that bird just shit into a dog.
Let me ask you this real quick. Is there a difference between, I guess, since you lived in you're living in Muskogee country, Muskogee Creek country? Is it different with the medicine that you see, you know, in Concho or in Wyoming? Is it different? Can you tell a difference?
Some of it, I mean, not a lot. You can't. I think the bad is worse in some places than the good. I don't know how to put that. There's more tribal members wanting to do bad than there is to do good nowadays. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I can definitely. I can see where you're coming from on that because, you know, you see, you know, we kind of hate on each other a little bit. You know, us Indians, we do that a little bit to each other. You know, I don't, you know, don't come after me. That's all I'm saying. Leave me alone. But
I know, me too. Yeah, me too. Don't
it's
leave me.
like,
I'm just telling it like it is.
yeah, leave us alone. But we do be hating on each other a little bit. You know,
Oh
this
yeah,
world is big enough
it's
for
called
all of us.
jealousy. Yeah.
This world is big enough for all of us. That's all I'm gonna say. But kind of keeping it moving on your story. So you worked at Concho Casino. Can you give us some stories before we lead up to the footage?
Yep. Yeah, when I first started working there, everybody told me that, hey, you might see some strange things. You know, don't let it bother. I'm like, how am I going to let it bother me? But I worked in, it was called the Concho Cafe before they changed it to the restaurant now. It was not as big. It was just a little cafe, and they didn't have, they had bingo there. I don't know if they still do or not. And the bingo buses and stuff. And so we would wait tables and everything. And I worked the overnight shift when I first started there. And I would make these big, huge pots of coffee. The lids on the coffee pots were probably about like this big. There was 4 of them.
Okay.
And to move the lids on those, you would have to take this pole and pull it over and then take the lid off and fill it up and then put it back on. Well, I did that one night. And so I went out and took a smoke break. And all of a sudden, all 4 of them lids came off and hit the floor. And I was already halfway. When they hit the floor, I was already halfway across the bingo hall. And this was like at 2:00 in the morning. There was a little girl. She would play hide and seek with us. She wore a little pink dress, long black hair. You could tell she was native. She would play hide and seek with us in the kitchen. We'd leave cookies and stuff out for her at night when everybody would shut down. You would just barely see her peek around the corner, and then she'd disappear. And they were like, what is the... And then people would ask us, how come there's a little girl here? Because you had to be 18 to get in. And I was like, oh, you seen the little girl? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, I don't know why she's in here. Because I didn't want to say, hey, it's a ghost.
Man.
Let's see. And then, the security guards always caught stuff on camera. One night, we were fixing to close up. It was 3:00 in the morning. I was trying to get all my stuff done. And I hear over the radio, because they would give me a radio, because if I went in the back, they can say, hey, somebody's up the counter. Can you come back up here? And I heard them, what are you doing? What are you looking at? And he was like, guys, there's an emergency right here. This lady fell down and it looks like she's convulsing. And they were like, there's nobody there. And he's leaned over looking on the ground, like panicking, like trying to get his radio to work and everything. And on the cameras, there was nobody there.
Man. Wow.
We've seen behind the casino, me and an older lady, we always called her grandma. And we went out one night, we took trash out, and we were back there smoking. And we seen this light off in the field. And I was like, where's that light? Somebody's got a flashlight out there. And she's like, I wonder what they're doing. And I said, well, all of a sudden that light moved really fast towards us. Like, I mean, like it just like was gone coming towards us like a fireball. But by the time I turned around, she's already in the door and I'm trying to run. And they got that on the security camera too. Because they were cracking up about how fast she outran me. But we couldn't explain. We couldn't explain where that light came from. Because 1 minute was there. I mean, you didn't see nothing, and the next, it was there, and then it charged us.
Wow.
And
yeah,
my uncle, the casino, it was haunted. It was really, really haunted. I don't know if it still is. I haven't been in it in a long time.
It just sounds like that there's a lot of footage out there that may never see the light of day when it comes to some of this stuff.
Especially with the casino. Because like even my dad worked out there. He worked in the kitchen with me, and then he was in maintenance. And they would say that when they would go into the bathroom to clean the bathrooms in the evening, that you could hear water running, and every once in a while you'd see like a pair of hands under the water. Just hands, nothing else.
Whoa.
And the lights in the bathroom would turn off and on by themselves.
That's creepy though. That's so creepy when lights turn on and off by themselves. That's always been a creepy thing to me.
Especially when you're in the bathroom and you're the only one in there.
Right. Oh man. Have you had it?
Now this one's not a ghost story.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But this one's not a ghost story. But when them guys broke out of the prison in Texas, they came to the casino. There was like 4 or 5 of them. And my dad was like, hey, come here. And I was like, what? He's like, you see that guy with the blonde hair that's all jacked up? And I said, yeah. He's like, go look up. Because it was like when the computers and stuff were just starting to come out. He was like, I think that's the guys from the prison break in Texas. I stayed in the freezer for the rest of the night. They were there for like an hour, 2 hours.
Just leave?
Nobody said nothing. And then they left. And
okay.
I was like, I'm kind of glad they left, because when they pulled the money out of the machines was like 2 hours later. I was like, I think they were watching the casino.
Oh yeah. So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Since we're here at the casino, you were working there. I know I've been teasing this all night. Everybody's been waiting. What happened that day? Or I guess with the lead, give us the full timeline. I guess if you can remember back, the full timeline for the incident with the famous Bigfoot footage.
Okay, so in 2000, and I know it was after January because I had cancer and I had just got my cancer removed, and I had come back to work. I had got it removed in January, and I came back to work at the end of January, and so this started in February. And we decided, me and this other guy, we were the managers of the cafe. We thought, we come in early, 6:00 in the morning. We start prep time, which we have to prep all the vegetables, all the stuff for the day, have to get it cooking, get it ready. So I thought, okay, the buffalo are outside. They had a big old fence. Every night, every day, you could see the buffalo right beside Lucky Star. I said, let's take these 5-gallon buckets. We'll fill them up. And then in the evening time, when we start to clean up, we'll go take them out and dump them and feed the buffalo. I said, we'll do that every day. So we would fill them up, and they had barbed wire. You couldn't climb over the barbed wire because it was like 6-7 foot tall. So they had these metal, I don't want to say they're not gates because they don't open, but the barbed wire was on the end of these, and it was kind of like Jurassic Park. The bars were like this far apart, but they're real thick. Excuse me, they're real thick. But I could squeeze through there, and the other guy couldn't because he was like 6'5", 350 pounds. And so I would squeeze through there. I would take these 5-gallon buckets, and I would dump them. I would walk out quite a ways and dump all this slop on the ground. It was like tomatoes, lettuce, potato peelings, onions, and everything that we would have for days. And I would take them out there and dump them. So we did this for two to 3 weeks. They told us to quit. They come in and they were like, I know you guys are wanting to do this, but let's not do this anymore. We're getting calls from the ranch hands and stuff like that. I was like, okay. But when we would take them out, this is what got me. Didn't even think nothing about it. When we would take them out in the evening, the sun would be setting and it would be kind of dark, but not dark where you couldn't see. And then you'd go down this little hill and there's a bunch of trees down there. And sometimes the buffalo would be down there. And when we were feeding them, you never seen the buffalo come up. But you would hear whistles, or you would hear like clicking noises. Like they were, like you know how the predator clicks?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You would hear that every once in a while. And I thought, what is that noise? Didn't even put 2 and 2 together. So we quit. And one night, we had just changed the fryers. And so we had to take all that oil out to the grease trap, which is right out the back door in front of the camera, so they could watch us, because the dumpsters were off to the left, the grease traps right out front, the light poles on the side. Excuse me. And so this is about 1 o'clock in the morning, 1 or 2. We go and dump all this old grease into that grease pit. I go home. I have to come back at 6 o'clock in the morning. I get there at 6. I get to the cafe, and the other guy, I'll just call him Pops. He's like, come on, I got to show you something. I'm like, what? I was like, man, it is cold outside. I don't want to go back out. He's like, no, come on, I've got to show you something. I was like, okay. So we go out back, and we go down to the, where are we going? He's like, no, just come with me. I was like, okay. So we go through the barbed wire fence, because there's a shorter one. It's smaller, into this other field. It's only the 4-foot barbed wires. There's only like 4 strands of barbed wire. So we go through it, and I start looking, and I was like, who walked through here? Because they had just plowed this field not too long ago. And he was like, no. He's like, look at this. And he put a boot in one of the tracks, and he wore a size 15 boot because he was a big guy. And on either side of his heel, there was about an inch on either side. And on the front, there was about 3 inches. And it was, whatever it was heavy because it did step down. And he couldn't step down like that. He could not make the indentation like it did. So he's like, come on, I got something else to show you. And I'm like, okay. So we go back in and we go to the security door and he knocks on it. And the guy that I know, and because he used to work in the cafe with us before he went to security, let us in and he let us watch the video. He said, this is exactly 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours after you guys had dumped that grease. So what had happened was we had stopped feeding whatever we were feeding for about 2 weeks. And I guess when we dumped that grease, they seen us dumping the buckets into the grease trap. And I think maybe they thought that's where we were putting the food. So it comes up out of the field, goes under the light, goes to the grease trap, kind of like fiddles with the grease trap lid, kind of lifts it up a little bit, takes its other hand, takes the grease and then licks it and kind of shivers, puts it down and walks off towards the dumpsters. So let's get to the lockdown part. My dad told me I could never tell this. I go and call my dad. I said, Dad, there's a Bigfoot at Concho. I said, I've seen the footprints. I wish now I would have told him, go get me something to make cast. Because you could see the toes. I mean, you could see the toes, the feet. I mean, you could see like little ridges in them and stuff like that. I wish now I'd have told him, but I called and told him. News Channel 4 shows up an hour and a half later. My dad had called News Channel 4.
Oh my goodness.
So that's where, and I told him I would never tell anybody until he passed away. And he's been gone for 3 years. And I was like, oh my goodness, Dad. What? That's where all the news, where it came in. Because he had called them and told them, said they had a sighting of a Bigfoot. They have it on video. They have tracks out in the field. 3 hours after all this happened, by 11 o'clock, the tracks were gone. Somebody had come in and plowed the field again. That day, everything was wiped. They said they took the tapes, they destroyed them. But I know one security guard who has a video, who had one. I know he made a copy. And then the one you were talking about said he had seen the video. So there's more than one person that said they took a video of the Bigfoot.
Let me ask you this, just as a follow-up question. The gentleman that I spoke with, basically, for everyone that's hearing this has only been told, what, the second time you said?
Yeah.
Now I want to say this, and I 100% believe this story because this was corroborated with the security guard that she just mentioned. And the stories are literally the exact same. And I don't think you've talked to him in quite a while, right?
No, I haven't seen him since he moved.
So yeah, I had talked to both the witnesses, and if you listen on the Patreon, I get into the other side, the other story, of this security guard. But one thing that is left out, that I see a lot that is left out about the stories that I see online, or the buffalo. I don't see that. Like they forget to mention the buffalo, and basically what the footage is. But I'm going to ask you this question because I'm just kind of curious on, when you saw the footage and basically everything ensued, you're saying within 3 hours, everything was wiped.
Yep.
Officially.
Yes. By the time our 2:00 people were supposed to be there, everything was gone. And we were told that we were not allowed to talk about it. If we were to talk about it and they found out, that we would lose our jobs and that they could also sue us or for slander or spreading lies. And we were just told to keep our mouth shut.
And let me ask you this too. During that time, how long did so this happened in 2000 and you said in February-ish, March-ish. What ensued in the following months since all this happened? If you remember.
It did get out. There was a Bigfoot group that did try to come in. They wouldn't let them in because I overheard some of because when you work in the kitchen and you can get free food to everybody that works in the casino, you make friends.
Mm-hmm.
So you hear a lot of stuff that goes on. And they were saying that they wanted to come in, they wanted to film, they wanted to see. Now, I did hear that they did take cast before they plowed the field up. Somebody came in and took cast. But it was a tribal member. It wasn't somebody outside of the tribe. And they tried, people, and the reason why they said they didn't want it out is because they didn't want people on the reservation coming in and just hunting and shooting at everything and trying to find and trampling all over. So we kept our mouth shut.
Yeah, that's I posted a clip and it's on the Patreon too, but it's a clip from a old, I think like 2004, 2005. It was called Oklahoma Wild Man. And somebody who was a part of I'm not going to use the name of this group because a lot of people really don't like this group or they love this group. I'm sorry, I don't want to get in the middle of that. But there's a group here in Oklahoma, and they have a branch here in Oklahoma that basically, quote unquote, investigated this and allegedly got tracks that they outside of, I guess, nearby in a nearby location got tracks and that was one thing that I find very interesting about that is the other person that I talked to about this, they said that there had been a lot of activity prior to the prior to the footage being a thing. But I also heard a rumor too about the bus driver. I know that's a thing that I've heard, and I mentioned it on the show that you heard me on. Can you talk about that bus driver a little bit?
I knew him. He was hilarious. But what had happened was he wasn't feeling good that night. And so he decided to stay on the bus. And because he had a lot of health problems. He was one of the sweetest, funniest. He just thought he was everything guy. It cracked me up. He looked like a 70s playboy. And he said that he was laid back in the chair. He said didn't know if he ate something before they came to play bingo or something. So he was out there. The thing is, we went and checked on him before that to see if he needed anything. We had went out there to see if he needed any water or anything like that because we liked our bus drivers. They were really nice to us, tipped well, everything. And so he said all of a sudden, and those big old buses, they're not little buses. They're like what the Greyhounds, they're kind of like that is what they drove in. And he said that something hit the side of the bus and it rocked. And he could feel it. And he said it wasn't just a little rock, it was a big rock. And from what he told me, didn't understand if he's seen it or if the hand came up and was on tapping the window. Because he said it did tap like a hand, and those bus windows are pretty high off the ground.
Yeah.
Like you can't see them just standing on the ground. And he said that hand come up and was tapping. And we thought he was joking with us until all this stuff came out. Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, this was before the video came out.
Yeah, that's what I was told too as well, is that it all happened before. And another thing, I got a question here in the chat. This is something that I've heard too as well, and maybe I don't know if you know anything about this. You can just say no, and we can move on. But someone asked, "Is it true that the Men in Black showed up?"
I was wondering if somebody would ever ask that question. There was a group of 4 guys that came in. Black hats, black sunglasses, black suits. Asking, and this is what scared the crap out of everybody, because they were asking who had all seen the video. But nobody would say nothing. Because, like I said, if we talked about it, we'd lose our jobs. So nobody would talk to anybody. And the guy that I worked with, he was like, hey, let's go back here in the maintenance room. He said, because he said, I don't trust these guys. They look weird. They look off. They just had like a vibe about them. And it's like, and what I felt when they came up, because they got something to drink, and I was like, yeah. When they were asking like who had all seen the video, what did it look like, and nobody would say anything. And they stayed around for about, I want to say about 30 minutes or so, acting like they were looking around or acting like they were playing the machines, but what they were doing was trying to get information.
Just for the people that are they're gonna say, well, why didn't you ask her what they look like? So you said that they had basically black attire on. A lot of people say Men in Black kind of look like their ears are weird, their faces are. Did you see anything like that? They're a little pale.
No, they weren't. No, that's what we thought. That's why we thought they were weird, because they didn't look like they had the black glasses on, so you couldn't see their eyes. But their hats came down. They had like the little, I don't know what they're called, not fedoras, but they had the little hats. You couldn't see their ears. And you couldn't see their hair.
That's interesting. Yeah, because that's been
what color their hair was, if they had hair.
That's a conspiracy that's been kind of been kicked around about this tape, about this footage, and all the aftermath of everything. Is I had heard the Men in Black thing too. Why do you think they would show up if that was them?
But see, I never really wanted to say anything about that, because I didn't think anybody would believe me. They would be like, oh, now you're just making stuff up. And no, they showed up more than once. And sometimes it would be 2 guys, sometimes it'd be 3 guys, sometimes there'd be 4, and sometimes there would even be 1. But you could always tell, because they never took their glasses off. And in a casino, yes, there is flashing lights and stuff, but in the evening time when the lights are dimmed, you still can't see with that dark glasses on.
That's creepy.
And
That's so creepy.
And they had gloves on. They never took their gloves off.
Were they tall? Uh-oh. Oh, man, guys. Uh-oh. All right, for everybody that's listening on the back end, we're talking about Men in Black at the Concho Casino, and Rebecca's gone, zapped. Um, I'm a little spooked out. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I'm there's a my spidey senses are going off at this time. Um, I'm a little. I don't know really know what to say. Um, we're we're uh, we're getting into some weird stuff, but that's not weird. I believe her. Um, that stuff has been going on for a long time. Let's see if she can get back in here. Um, but that that is so amazing. That's the story. Um, for those of you guys who didn't get to listen to this live, and it's spooky. It's no doubt spooky. Um, especially when it comes to why are Bigfoot? Why are they? I guess you say why do we cover it up? Um, this has become probably my favorite episode. And let's see here. We'll see if we can get her back here. Just 1 second, y'all. She's back. Okay. I got nervous there.
I got kicked out talking about the Men in Black.
Yeah, that's weird.
Well, you know what? I was listening to a podcast today, and they said when they started talking about the Men in Black, they got kicked out and couldn't get back on.
I'm glad you're able to get back on. I just told everybody I'm a little spooked out. I ain't gonna lie. Let's do this. Let's move. I know.
Yeah, because as soon
Yeah, so after those guys showed up, what happened? Did anything else happen up until until you left? Did you hear anything more about it?
They said after that, that's when everybody started telling stories about at Sundance, how and powwows that the Bigfoot would come up and to where you could just barely see them standing at the edge of the powwow grounds, and they would be swaying back and forth with the music and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one thing that's that they do say that they do that. Man, I'm still kind of creeped out by that. I ain't gonna lie, Rebecca. I'm trying to get my composure over here. I'm creeped out by that. That's in the 2 years that we've talked about. I mean, on my podcast, I've only had one other time where that's happened, where they just got booted and they couldn't get back in. As it was with Mr. Matt Sieber from East Tennessee Bigfoot. We started getting into the cover up of Bigfoot. And I even had to apologize for the audio issues and just for that episode.
And you're having audio issues right now too because
I think we lost her again.
Did it go off?
Okay, here you go. Now, yeah, this is
yeah, we're probably going to have issues now.
Anyway, speaking about talking about our favorite people in the world. No, I'm just kidding. Anyways, so you worked at the casino. How much longer after that till you, or I guess how much longer did you work at the casino after this whole thing?
I worked for another year after this. And then I left. But speaking of the hyena thing.
Oh, yes. Okay.
The subject.
Yeah, let's do that real quick.
So my dad told me that whenever they had a campground out there that my uncle used to stay out at Concho, and they would see these like little hyena dogs running around. but they were big. They were too big to be regular hyena dogs. So my dad and uncle thought maybe they were the little Bigfoot running around because they not walking upright, but they were like using their arms to move themselves forward. So to my hyena experience, this happened back in 2017 here in between Wetumpka and Holdenville on Highway 75. We were driving home one night, and this big gray, we were driving a Hyundai Santa Fe, a 2006 little SUV, and this gray dog looking thing dashes out in front of our car. Hairless. And I know what coyotes with mange or dogs with mange look like. This was not a coyote. The whole body, form, shape, everything was wrong. It slanted from the top of its head to the back of its legs, was slanted down, like its back legs was shorter than the front legs. The ears were big on it, but what got me was the snout was not pointed. It was flat. And the only reason why I can describe it this easy is because I seen it a couple of days later in the daylight. It had casually, as I was coming home, it had casually just took a bound into the middle of the street or the highway, and then another bound off into the ditch, and then it turned around and looked at me. And when it opened its mouth, it didn't look like, it looked like a grin. It was weird, but its ears looked like bats. Like the big bat ears.
Mm-hmm.
It looked like the big bat ears. Then it had like the square face, and then it was slanted. Like when it was just standing there, you could tell that it was just slanted. Like its back legs were shorter, but it didn't have no hair. It was all gray. If I hadn't had my daughter in the car with me, I probably would have stopped and took pictures. But she was only 3 at the time, and she was asleep in the back seat, and I didn't want to chance it.
You know, it's crazy. I was talking to the guys at Cryptids of the Corn podcast. We were talking off air about this. Well, actually, they came on my podcast and talked about it, but Justin over there was saying that we have hyenas here in America, and I looked at him, and I was kind of like, what? It's kind of this look like, what? I don't know, but it is possible, is what he said.
But see, that's what they were like, well, you've seen a coyote with mange. I was like, no, because when animals get mange, they get lethargic to the point where all their hair is gone. They kind of get lethargic where they don't move around as fast. This thing bolted. I mean, it bounced from the edge of the road. It come running out of a field, bolted, bounced, and then stopped and turned around. And then the one that we seen a couple of nights before, I mean, it was going as fast as it could across the road. It was like a blur. And I was like, yeah, that's not something with mange, because usually when they're at that point, they're really sick and really lethargic, and they don't move a lot.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's definitely. I'm gonna have to, and this is out. You said where is this kind of located? You don't have to give the exact town name, but just kind of what area of Oklahoma.
Oh, it's between Wetumpka and Holdenville. It's on Highway 75 going south.
Okay.
I don't care if because that highway and that one and the one between Malika is crazy.
They say it's creepy out that way.
See a lot of stuff. It is creepy out that way.
Yeah,
it's creepy it's creepy around here too.
And so you saw this in what year did you see this thing?
It had to be, I know it was in 2017 because we had moved to our house in Holdenville in May of 2017. So yeah, around May or June that I seen it. Because it was right after all them big fires we had down this way.
Oh, okay. Probably pushed it out of
that's
its
when we
territory.
seen, yeah, because that's when we seen my husband before we moved and all those fires were going around. He rode his motorcycle when he worked at O'Reilly's, and he went from Holdenville to Wetumpka, and he said that he seen something standing by one of the cedar trees. There's a lone tree and then there's a cedar tree. And he said, I don't remember there being two cedar trees right there. And he said all of a sudden the second cedar tree just moved around the other one.
Hmm.
And then he said, I just kind of rode my bike because he was on a motorcycle. He's like, I just kind of pushed it as fast as I could. And then we went back and looked, and I was like, yeah, there's not two cedar trees right there. And then I think we seen a little one around the same time. We were coming back from Shawnee going into Wetumpka, and there's a old peanut factory out there outside of Wetumpka. And there used to be like a rock gravel hill. And this little monkey looking thing ran out in front of our car and went over that little pile, and then we didn't see it again. Because it was only it had to be about 3 or 4 foot. And I was like, my husband said, did you see that? And I was like, yeah. And then my niece was like, she was sitting in the back seat and she was like, what was that? So we all three seen it.
Let me ask you this. You've seen all these different things. You've seen from anywhere from little people, little person, whatever, however, LP is what I call it, because I don't want them messing with me. But Bigfoot, you've seen the footage, you have seen ghosts, you have seen demons, you've seen everything. What has there ever been a story or an encounter with anything that had just really truly scared you?
Not real. Well, there was this, when we used to go to this church, and I'm not going to say no names or anything because the person's still alive, but he was a pastor at a church. And him and his wife, they had been to Ecuador. They were missionaries. And one night they were preaching, and he was up at the pulpit, and he was like, I'm not afraid of the devil. He's like, I challenge him. In the name of God, I challenge him. And so his wife gets into it, and she's sitting in the front row of the church, and when she turns around to look at us, her face just contorted into a demon looking creature. And
Whoa.
I seen it. I heard another person beside me gasp like like that. And then my dad's like, did you see that? And I was like, yes. I was like, I don't think they should be going to Ecuador anymore. But they changed when they came back from Ecuador. They completely changed. They got hateful. They weren't preaching like they were supposed to. But when I seen that, I think that really scared me to what people actually let into their lives.
Mm-hmm. Man, so this show has
smoke
been.
Off after this.
Yeah, hey, you're not even lying. This show, I appreciate you, sharing and being very candid about the things that you've seen and the information that you have given all of us. Do you, before we wrap this thing up, do you want to tell any other stories that you got in mind that you want to tell everybody? before we wrap this thing up?
I'll tell this one because my mom and dad, before my dad passed away, they couldn't believe this. And to this day, I'm like, there's got to be a reason for me telling this story to them. So one day we were sitting there and I was talking to my mom and dad. And my dad had just got back from doing some kind of procedure. We'd gotten back from the hospital. And I told them they were talking about old times. And I told them, I said, do you guys remember that house that we used to go to in Colorado? I said they had the front room and they had the 2 Dobermans. And I told them exactly like where the couch was, the tables. I said the Dobermans were not allowed. These 2 little Dobermans they were not allowed on the carpet. So they couldn't come in the front room, but they could be in the kitchen. They could be in the hallway. I described the hallway to them. I described their kitchen, how the kitchen had this island and it had brick wall on it. And I was like, and when we had to go to the bathroom, I said they had to hold them dogs or put them up so we could go to the bathroom and come back out. And my mom and dad are sitting there looking at me. And they were like, when we went to their house, you weren't even born.
Whoa.
They said, your older brother was just a baby. And I said, no, Mom, I've been there. I said, I remember the color of their couch. I remember that the dogs would come bark at the front room because the front room had carpet in it and they were not allowed on the carpet. And they knew that. And I said, when you had to go to the bathroom, I said, we walked down the hall to the bathroom. I said, there was a little stove when they had those old timey gas stoves that were in the wall.
Mm-hmm.
I said, there was a little gas stove. Her bathroom was pink. And she said, no, you were not born yet. She was like, how do you know that? And both my mom and dad they were like, how do you know that? I said, I've been there. And they said, no. I said, you had to walk up 5 steps to get onto their brick porch. They had a porch that had pillars and it was brick. And the front door was off to the side a little. And they were like, no, you were never there. They moved before you were born.
Something else, man. Something that's awesome. That's awesome. Wow.
And they told me that they had never mentioned that to anybody. So, because my mom was like, I forgot all about them living in that house until you brought it up. They were like, even your older brother wouldn't remember because he was only like 6 months old. And he's 10 years older than I am.
You got some type of there's an ability that was given to you, and it sounds like your daughter too as well. That it's
I
pretty.
think all of us have it. My older brother and my younger brother have it. My mom and dad both have it. But I think my grandma, my dad's mom, told us that we would have the abilities when we were born. Sometimes I ignore them, sometimes I don't.
Yeah. Well, everything that you've talked about tonight, I'm a little speechless. I'm not gonna lie to you. There's certain things that you say that I have heard very few people talk about when it comes to certain things, and I appreciate you coming on my podcast. And I guess you're meant to find me some way. You heard an interview from like a year and a half ago, and here you are.
Yeah. When it's time, it's time. That's what I always say.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I'm gonna have trouble sleeping tonight. Not really because I'm scared or spooked out, but you got me thinking on some things that I hadn't really thought about in quite a long time, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate you coming on my podcast.
Not a problem. I enjoyed it. So it's fun to talk about this stuff with people who are actually interested in it, and not saying, "Oh, you're crazy," or "You're kooky," or "You're just making all this stuff up." But a lot of this, I have people that can back it up.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, no doubt. Is there any parting words that you'd like to give the audience, or before we wrap? Like I said, this is before I do the outro.
Better go smoke off, everybody. We're gonna have everything following y'all home.
Everybody got everybody's getting it tonight, man. But Rebecca, I appreciate you. I thank you for coming on.
Okay. So if I think of any more stories, I'll let you know.
We had to, hey, for you guys that are listening now, you need to like and comment what you thought about this episode. Do it right now. You know, right now. Let me know if you want a part two. If y'all want a part two of this might have to be Patreon only, so we didn't get what happened earlier. You know, you never know. We might have to be Patreon only. I don't know. We'll see. But you guys can catch me on Facebook, Yahola Tiger. Shoot me a message and let me know where you heard me, and then I'll accept your friend request. I got a few people in there that I'm like, I ain't heard from you. I don't know who you are. I'm pretty kind of protective of my Facebook in a sense. Let's see here. TikTok, Warcry Pod. On X, I believe it's Warcry Pod. If you guys follow me on X, hey, that's my spicy. Those are my spicy takes on there. I let it go, man. Some things I see, I'm like, this is crazy. But if you have a story or an encounter or anything that you want to share, email me realwarcrypod@gmail.com and support the podcast. There's a super chat button right there, $1.50. It doesn't matter to me. Supporting the podcast is supporting the podcast. Also, too, a like, a thumbs up, and a comment helps just as much. I'm like really on the edge of becoming monetized for the podcast, so I can start running ads. I know I ran ads on the podcast on the audio part, and people are like, you got like 6 ads on there. So hey, it bought this soundboard and equipment and all this stuff that I have that makes me sound a little bit better than before. But support the podcast, like, share, subscribe, comment, and then there's super chat, and then during live streams, and then there's also super thanks, which is after the live stream. And then also to Patreon. Miss Rebecca here is a member of the Patreon, and that's why she's got an episode, but she's also got great stories too. She came and she brought the heat, but there'll be more coming. 2025. I'm going to be working on doing Patreon only live streams, so that'll be something to look forward to. I may have to have her come in and deliver a part 2. It looks like a couple people want to see a part 2. So, but once again, Rebecca, I appreciate you coming on my podcast. And
thank you for listening.
Yeah, no problem at all. Hey, thank you everybody for listening. We appreciate it. And for myself, Yahola Tiger, we'll catch you on the next one.